Welcome to this beach themed video. My name is Rae Campbell and today we're going to be doodling seaweed, which is a rather unusual subject, but I really enjoy painting it. I have a list here of my favourite paints from Deep Light and we'll go through them one by one as we work through this little video. I adore these colours both individually and together, so we're going to paint seaweed in easy to follow steps. So if you want to grab your supplies, you can join in with me. I will link all the materials underneath this video. This is the kind of shape that I had in mind, and I'm using a handful of my favourite brushes, a number 8, a number 4 and a number 2. I'm also doing my drawing with this fine liner pen, but if you prefer to draw with a pencil, then please go ahead. I know it can be a little bit daunting using an ink pen to draw your outline, but I really enjoy doing it this way because it gives me a sense of freedom. In other words, if I get it wrong, I can't go back, I just work with it rather than keeping erasing and just trying to solve my mistakes by erasing them. I don't want to do that. I want to just draw it organically and make it look wrong and messy and mucky, and it doesn't matter. I've sped up this little bit for you because it's just me drawing. I'm using, by the way, a cold press paper today. I like the texture of this kind of paper, and although it's a little bumpy to draw on, it doesn't matter. I really enjoy it. I like the way it looks, I like the way it goes wrong, I like the way it goes wonky, and I'm not bothered. The paper that I'm using is from Bahong and it's a 300 GSM 100% cotton. Now let's get on to the fun part, my favourite paints. Deep Light paints are all handmade and they recommend that you waken them up with just a little drop of water. Lapis lazuli is a beautiful blue tone. Now it might seem strange to be using that with seaweed, but just trust the process. We also have rhubarb here and a little bit of forest green. I've chosen to use lapis lazuli because I really like that subtle blue tone that it gives me, and I'm applying this to the left hand side of the seaweed. This gives it a kind of organic, natural look. Now lapis lazuli is a single pigment colour, it's completely transparent and it's really great for adding that tiny little splash of blue. It reminds me of the sea and it's just adorable. The green that you see there on my palette is forest green, and I've added a lot of water to this because this one really packs a punch. You need to add it really watery to begin with watercolor, because you need to build your layers up slowly and let them dry between each layer, unless of course you're looking for a different look. Using my number 2 brush to apply these, and I'm letting one colour kind of merge into the next. The other colour that you see there on my palette is called rhubarb, and it's a kind of yellowy green tone. I'm applying this to the bottom section and I'm going to be adding this throughout the tutorial. Let me just talk you through the colours that I've chosen. Lapis lazuli, which I've just mentioned. We have river. Now river is a really beautiful, highly granulating, dark, deep blue-green tone. Think of the depths of the ocean, and that's kind of where you are with this colour. It's a highly granulating colour, which means you need to add a lot of water to get the maximum benefit from it. The other colour there is rhubarb, which I've already mentioned, and I'm just applying these colours where I think they need to be on the seaweed here. I'm just making this up. It's kind of how I imagine seaweed to look. I've seen photos, I've taken photos of this in the past, so this is just from memory and just an idea of what I'd like it to look like. So we're not colour accurate, we're not worried about that here, and I'm dropping in a little bit of that dark green tone into the rhubarb so that it just blurs into the paper. You saw me there pointing to oak moss. Now I have a lot to say about this colour. You'll notice that it looks really different on my palette there compared to the dry down version on my watercolour paper test card. That's because this is a really special super granulating colour. It's another highly dual-toned granulating colour. It's a grey-green with a bit of a purple hue. It's really it's really hard to describe it, but when you add a lot of water to this colour, it becomes really magical. I'm not really doing it justice here, using it in small quantities, but trust me, this is one that you'll really want to add to your collection. The more water you add to these granulating colours, the more special they become. They are really, really magical, and I absolutely love using them. You'll notice how that colour looks very different on the palette compared to the dry down, as I've just said, because when it dries down, something happens. It's almost wizardry. It's just so special and wonderful. I'm picking up the colours that I've mixed on my palette, just randomly picking them up and dropping them in. All I'm looking for here is a difference between one shade and the next. We're not worried about it looking super realistic. All we're looking for are different colours. This is rhubarb. I'm just using my small brush. I just feel it's given me a little bit of a better control. And we're adding these colours. You can see they're even merging together on my palette, and I really don't mind. Not fussy at all. I've switched to my number 4 brush, and I'm mixing up a little bit of Masher's Green. Now, Masher's Green is a hugely bright, granulating yellow-green tone, and I wanted to put this down the central vein of this part of the seaweed because it's going to represent the middle area, and I wanted to pack a punch with my vibrant green yellow tone. So this is what we're adding here using that number 4 brush. Now we're going wet on wet, which means that we're going to add the water to the watercolour paper where we want to drop that pigment in, and I'm mixing Masher's Green with a tiny bit of rhubarb, a little bit more Masher's there just to brighten it up, and dropping it in, and you can see that that will just blur into the water that I've applied onto the watercolour paper and let it work its magic. Cleaning my brush, and now I'm just picking up a tiny bit of oak moss. And again, I'm just dropping it in where that paper is damp and letting it merge into the Masher's Green wash I've just done, and let it do its thing by just merging itself into that water. With granulating paints, you'll need to give them a little mix when they are mixed up on your palette, because they will separate out. So to get the maximum benefit from them, add plenty of water and keep mixing them when they are on your palette, as I'm doing here. And just dipping between the mixes that I've got there. To recap, we have forest green, lapis lazuli, rhubarb, oak moss, and of course that stunning Masher's Green. Notice at this point that I'm adding really watery washes, which means I've got a lot of water to pigment ratio. And this is really important for your first watercolour wash. If you haven't used watercolour before, what we're doing here is we're adding our base layers. This is where we are going to drop the colours on top. It's our kind of guide, our sort of mapping in our colours, if you like, so that we know we're not going to go hugely wrong with our first wash because it's so light anyway, it doesn't matter. And when we come to add subsequent washes when these are dry, it'll give us a better idea of where we're going to be adding the paint later on. Wet on wet again, which means I'm adding the water to the paper where I want to drop that paint. And we'll do the same around the other side of that central vein. Just adding a little bit of water there really carefully and letting it merge into the existing paint at the bottom. Adding a huge bit of, this is forest green. This is a really dark green tone. I've added plenty of water just to get it moving, and I'm adding it to the watercolour paper and leaving little gaps here and there because I want it to look a little bit textured and not flat. And by retaining that white paper, it's just what I want to do, just to leave it looking a little bit more organic. I'm making this up, as I've said, and we're just letting that paint sort of wiggle into the paper like this. Just dropping it in and pressing and releasing that brush, so to give it a natural look. Because the paper is wet, it'll gently blur into that wet paper. Masher's Green is going on next, and let it gently merge into that colour that we've applied just now. And I see I'm going to add a lot of yellow on this one. This is straight onto the watercolour paper, wet on dry. So this time we're not wetting the paper to begin with, rather apply it straight onto the watercolour paper. There's no rhyme or reason or right or wrong way, it's just a preferred method for some people. And I'm giving this a little bit of a mix. This is this is forest green. And just dropping into the Masher's Green, as you can see. Back to the blue colour and just adding this on this part of the seaweed. I really like this blue tone. I think it's so pretty. It's really gentle and just gives that sort of suggestion of blue. I really, really like using it. I haven't used this colour very much. I think by adding the blue tone, I think in my mind's eye, I'm seeing this kind of reflections of the sea by adding the blue. It just looks really natural and I really like it. Everything's completely dry now, so we can start to think about building up our colours. And I've added my drops of water and a few drops of water to my palette as well. And we're going to start off by oak moss. Oak moss is a beautiful colour, and like I said at the start of this video, something that needs a little bit of an explanation, I feel. You can see how it separates out here on my palette, where you can see all those lovely colours. You'll need to add a lot of water, and as I said, because I'm using it in smaller areas, you can't really see the full benefit. But this is a colour that I've used many, many times in my own tutorials on my channel, and I absolutely adore it. It's great for painting leaves, and Deep Light released this as part of their Soul of the Oak set. I think it was back in 2024, I hope I'm right, and just stunning colours. It's one I use all the time. I'm a botanical artist and I absolutely love it. But just look how that blue looks on that seaweed. It's just gorgeous. Dropping in a little bit of I was going to say Soul of the Oak is oak moss, and again just letting it blur into that colour. Just picking up the colours from my palette really randomly, not too fussy. We're not about accuracy today, we're just about having fun and making it up as we go along, because that's what painting's all about, right? It's not about, being too hard on yourself. It's about enjoying the process and learning as we work through each tutorial. You never quite know how each painting is going to turn out before you start, and every one of us will paint the same painting, but it will never quite look the same, even if you follow the instructions step by step, because we all have a different way of painting, rather like handwriting. It's never going to look the same. So just join in and have fun and, learn to paint as you paint. That's my kind of slogan, learn to paint as you paint, which is what we're doing. And what better way than to use the best paints ever. I absolutely love these handmade paints from Deep Light, and if you haven't tried them before, I urge you to try them because they are just beautiful. Honestly, I don't think I've used paints like them. I've been painting as a professional artist for almost 15 years now, and hand on heart, they are the best paints I've ever used, and I won't be using anything else ever again, and I can genuinely say that. And I know that many of my own followers will agree with me that I purchased these paints, how gorgeous they are. Rhubarb here, going on with a tiny bit of oak moss, just to add a bit of texture, and you'll see I'm leaving little gaps here and there, using that pattern motion with my number 4 brush. Notice how I give that green colour a little bit of a mix there. That's forest green, and you can see that separation. That's why you need to keep mixing them up to get the benefit of those granulating colours. And again, going in with my number 2 brush, going over the colours that I've applied to start with, and just dropping them in and enjoying the process of painting. Lapis lazuli next with a little bit of oak moss, as you can see me pointing to those colours there. But before that, I go in with Masher's green. Just look how vibrant that is. And you can see now, because I'm layering the colours over the existing dry colours, how bright they look. These colours must be dry at this point because you're going to get that depth of colour that you need for these paintings. So join in with me and have fun and just draw anything you like and just have fun with it. It doesn't have to be a super accurate shape or anything like that. I will link, as mentioned before, all the colours that I've used today in the description box underneath, so if you want to check them out for yourself, then you can do that. So dropping in a tiny bit there of, this is forest green, and you can see it's just merging into that damp paint. Sometimes I use a damp brush just to kind of help those colours merge together, and we've got a little bit of river there going on at the top, and dragging it down into that damp paint with a tiny bit of oak moss. Back to the blue colour over here, just adding these colours, and this is river, of course. You can see how bluey green that looks. It's just beautiful. I adore this colour. I adore all of them. I say that a lot because I really do. Adding a tiny bit of oak moss and letting them blur together with a tiny bit of Mashers. So you can see that by using these colours, this is river by the way, letting them merge into each other on the paper when it's damp, they kind of become separated and granulating, and you can see how gorgeous they look. This is what watercolor is all about, just letting your paint do the work for you. This is Mashes, look how bright that is. Adding a little bit of Mashes here. This is Mashes green, of course, along with River. This time I've got a little less water, so the pigment is thicker, which means I get a stronger value of paint. I'm using a damp brush just to merge those colours where I want them to go to the outline of the seaweed. Again, the paint is very movable with a lot of water, so we can get that effect. Okay, we've cleaned out my palette, everything's dry, and this is Mashes green with lapis lazuli and of course oak moss. It will always look different when you mix it up. You can see it looks quite brown there on the palette, but against that green on the swatch card there. When this first happened to me, I really did think that I got the wrong colour, but it's the magic of watercolour, more so the magic of these beautiful colours. Taking the Mashes green all over this section here, just to brighten it up. And because watercolour is transparent, you can see those colours underneath. This is the beauty of layering watercolour. I decided to go back over that central vein at this point. I'm using my number 4 brush, by the way. Use whichever brushes you like. We all have our favourites, don't we? And this one is a number 4 brush, actually from Craft Demo. Cleaning the brush there, patting it dry. And I decided to mix a tiny bit of River with forest green to have a really strong colour here where these two parts of the seaweed kind of meet each other. I wanted to give a bit of variation with tone, and that's why I've mixed these colours together. The paint is still damp, which is why you see it blurring into that edge. So let me run through the colours again. Lapis lazuli is the gorgeous blue tone. We have River, which is the bluey green. Forest green, which is that super, super dark green tone. Oak moss, one of my favourites because of that granulation that goes everywhere with colours. We've got the sort of purpley tone in there as well. Rhubarb and Mashes green. We've got a lovely variation of colours there. You can see the little gaps that I've left on the seaweed. This is kind of meant to represent it glistening, where the sort of tide has gone out and you can see that water sort of pooling on the seaweed that you sometimes get when the sun hits it. Again, going back to that blue tone, reminding me of the sea. Adding some water again to the areas that I want to add that colour, avoiding the middle vein because I don't want the colour to go on that because we've painted that with Mashes green. Same on the other side. Just kind of merging those colours together and then dropping in a tiny bit of River with lapis lazuli. I hope I'm saying that right, by the way. I've always called it lapis lazuli. If I'm saying it wrong, let me know phonetically in the comments, just in case. Okay, just taking this colour down. That was River and a little bit of forest green. And oak moss is that colour there and River on this side. I'm trying my best to retain these lighter areas here, but I think I'm starting to lose them. A bit of Mashes going on there. But I do have a remedy, so stick around. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. Just, you can see how beautifully these colours layer, by the way. They haven't gone muddy and they're not lifting off because I've made sure that each wash has dried before applying the next. And of course, it emphasises the importance of applying your first wash with a lot of water and have it nice and thin so that you can know where you're going and it doesn't make your watercolour paintings go muddy. That's something you want to avoid with watercolour, overworking. Okay, so going back to oak moss there and just dropping it in. Just to add some texture and a bit of depth. That's all we need here at this point. This is forest green, this very dark green. And just doing a little bit of negative painting there around that central vein. And just emphasizing one or two of these little sections. I don't know what they're called. If you do know, let me know. At this point, I decided to use a white gel pen because I had lost some of my whites that I was trying to retain. So everything must be really dry if you're going to use one of these pens. You could use some white gouache or you could use some white paint. This is great though because you can apply it as I'm doing here, and then I use just a damp watercolor brush to merge the colours together. It gives you better control than paint sometimes, and it really packs a punch if you want to add small areas of white to your painting rather than masking them out. So I'm applying it straight onto the paper that's totally dry, adding a few dots and some squiggles at the top here. And then with a damp brush, I'm just going to merge them into the paper. Because this ink is water soluble, it's fantastic if you want to just blur it into your watercolor paper, just really, really gently. And it just gives you that little bit of a highlight that perhaps you need with your paintings sometimes. So a really good tip there for you. Use your gel pen, don't be frightened to use it, it's absolutely fine and is water soluble. I'll make sure that it is water soluble, but the one I'm using today is. Okay, so this painting is nearly finished. It gives me a chance to say thank you so much for watching. If you haven't considered to Deep Lights channel, perhaps you can do so by just hitting the subscribe button underneath. My name is Rae Campbell. Thank you so much for watching today, and I will link all the paints that I've used in the description box beneath. And why not give this a go yourself and join in with me and have some fun painting our beach themed painting.